we just have our SQL file that we found in the lesson, creating a simple database, users and posts, and an empty JavaScript file that we just put there. We install the dependencies, course and express. Now they appear here. Use course. Yes, but before we use course, we need to do something else, Joy. Define app as express, invoking express. So sort of instantiate an express app. Then I like to do the listen always first, because sometimes I remember forgetting the listen, and then if a server is not listening, can't do a lot of stuff. For the listen, what do we need? What are the two arguments? Const port. I'm gonna do 3000. And let's listen on that port. And the callback just to notify us that is what. Server running. At HTTP. Cool. Mm-hmm.
Ask. Is there a difference between HTTPS and HTTP, and should we be concerned about that?
That's a good question. The question is there a difference between HTTP and HTTPS? Yes, there is a difference, and the S stands for secure. When we're developing in our computers, HTTP is fine because we don't need it to be secure. When you are doing a bank transaction, you want to make sure it's on HTTPS. You know, you can inspect the URL, or you also now it also appears like a lock on the URL bar. Yeah, and I think most of the websites now are moving to HTTPS because it's secure, and that secure just means that the communication is encrypted. So if anybody intercepts the communication, they will just see random gibberish. Yeah, they cannot really make out what the communication is about.
Is that as easy as just calling it the S in there, or?
No, it requires a little bit more setup. Yeah, because you have to encrypt the messages, and yeah, that's a little bit more complicated. I actually have never set up HTTPS myself. A lot of the servers that we're going to be using provide that setup. Yeah. Cool. So we have our app listening. Let's use a course, as Shara said. Even though we're not going to use it just yet, let's just do sort of like the setup. App.use course. Before I can use course, what do I need to do? Define it, require it, whatever you want to call it. You can require at any point in your program, but it is standard to do it all the way at the top. Course. Let's then define maybe a few routes. I think there is some that we define here. No. Oh, so here in this example, we're requiring the body parsers. Let's don't do that. Let's just do app.use. This is for setting up the body parser. Express dot URL encoded. Extended true or false? False. That's setting up the body parser for URL encoded. Let's also set up the body parser for JSON. So this is, again, this is what we were talking about earlier, the two ways in which we can send data to the server more commonly. One in the body as URL encoded, another one in the body as raw JSON. Cool. Then let's create some routes. So for creating the routes, we're gonna create a route that's gonna be /users. And there we're gonna add some queries to get all the users, but now from our database. Now we remember that we have some users in the database now. Let's get those users from out of that database. So since we could do that in the app.js, but to just be more organized, let's create a folder called routes, and inside that folder, a file called users. So you can do that with terminal or in VS Code as well. I'm just gonna add a file routes. Actually, not a file, a folder routes, and inside of that folder, I'm gonna have file users. Let me call this file users router. This will be a little bit more explicit, at least for now. So here we're going to define the routes that are going to start with /users. So let's set up the router here with const require or express require express, then const router equal express that router and then don't forget to export module.exports plural equal router. This file we're going to import in the app.js to sort of direct requests to these handlers. So let's add a route here. I'm going to do router.get just so that we have something. Just a slash. Remember that this slash is going to be after /users. And then let's do rest. Remember that you don't need, if you're not going to use next, you don't need to specify it. In this case, I know that I'm not going to use next. And then let's do rest.send. This is /users. This is going to be /users. So once we have this router, I'm going to go back to my app, and then I'm going to import it here. I usually do these imports like here. Routers. Let's do const users router equal require. What do we call it? Routes /users router. I'm importing this module, this file that I created, user routers. And I import by requiring and specifying the path to that file. Current folder /routes user router. Then I could just use it. So you can do app.use what is the first argument here and the second one? So I want to use the user's router. What is the first argument to app.use that I need to specify here, Peter? Slash users. The endpoint in which you want to use the router, users. And the second argument? Yes. Somebody here, I think. Kathy, was that here? No? Okay. Hugo. The router itself. Users, router. So for using a router, you say app.use, the endpoint at which you want to use the router, and the second argument is the router itself, user's router. So should this run, I think? Like this, have anyone seen a bug or anything before we run it for the first time? I don't think there is a bug, but let's try it. We don't know. You never know until you're running. So if you're not running your code, you're not finding your bugs. Let's do node or nodemon. Let's do nodemon. App.js. Seems that is running. Let's try to make a request with the browser. HTTP ://localhost 3000. Cannot get. That is correct because we haven't set up this URL or this endpoint. Let's do /users. This is /users. Cool. Everyone was able to see the user's route of their server. Cool.
Is it a good habit to require routes, view other routes,
Yes, I do. Even though this is a required, this is sort of like, these are third-party modules. Those I prefer and I have seen more often being at the top. When it's your own required, it's more sort of permissible, and everything is possible, everything is permissible. But I do like to keep the routes imports in one section after all the app.use. After, I guess, yeah, this is something that I guess I never thought about. But what I do is I set up the third-party modules import at the top, then some initialization, like instantiating the server and defining some like constant variables here. Then after that, I set up the global middleware or the app level or app-wide middleware like this that I have selected. And then after that, I import my routes, and lastly, I use my router. Yeah. Cool. So I'm gonna add another route here just so that we have sort of a welcome page, because all websites should have a welcome page. So let's do rest. I'm gonna do rec.send. Oops. Welcome to Facebook. Like this. Oh, thank you. Response. We cannot send the request. We need to send the response. So I did that so that we can have, if I go to just say welcome to Facebook, or welcome to my server, whatever you want to call it. Cool. So what we want to do is, when we go to back to /users, we want to get all the users from our database. Malik.
Just a quick question.
Yeah.
Like if you put app.get, it seems app.use for the book page, or is it like for the user different things? Put app.get
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so I think we covered this, but app.use is sort of an alias for all of them. So when you do, even if I send a post request to slash, this is still gonna be seen. Welcome, yeah. So app.use is like an alias for all the methods. Yeah, app.get in here will be fine as well. Yeah. That's why this router works, right? Because we want to send all of them, get, put, post, all of them we want to send to the user's router. Cool. So we have this. We have our user's router, and then the fun stuff. Using PG promise. So for using PG promise, exactly the same way, before using Express, we need to install it. So let's kill this server, and I'm gonna say npm install pg-promise. Install. This is going to downloading PG promise, and it's gonna keep track of it in the dependencies folder. So pg-promise. What do you think that PG stands for? Awesome. And the promise. Promises. So good thing that you know about promises. And then you know about Postgres. There's just one smaller thing that we need to know more about, like PG promises specifically, and then you have all the tools. Cool. So we install PG promise. Let's just inspect our package JSON to see there. PG promise is now one of our dependencies. PG promise documentation is great. You should visit the GitHub page as well as the official docs. GitHub. You can just do like PG promise docs. And then the two top results, actually the first one and the third one, which you're gonna get more details. You should read this README at least once to get a better understanding of how PG promise works. I needed to read it. Hopefully you will read it too. Just do PG promise on Google. The top result is that. Cool. So PG promise is an interface to talking to a Postgres database from Node. Let's look at back here. So cool, let's set up PG promise. So we installed it. Then let's actually do some setup. Similar to Express, we need to require it and do some other steps. So what I'm going to do is, before I can actually get data from the database, I need to set up PG promise, and we'll do that in my user's router, or wherever you need the data, wherever you need to query the database. So here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to const PGP, short for PG promise. We do require PG promise. Let's do it like, let me comment this, import PG promise. I think we oftentimes import it. So PG promise, like this require PG promise, imports PG promise, and this PG promise is a function that we can just invoke here, so that we don't need to create another variable. We just invoke that function here. Don't worry if this is still confusing, but this require PG promise returns a function, the PG promise module, and we're just invoking it here by calling it like that. Similar to course, yes. Exactly. That's a good observation. Similar to course here. Yeah. This is used for something else that we're not gonna get into. But so once we have PG promise, then yes, Joey.
Is that ES5, ES6?
That's ES5. That's always been there. Yeah. Cool. So once we have that, we need a connection string. So do you remember when I said about the Express or Postgres? We're still in the model server client, where the client PSQL is sending those queries to Postgres. Well, it turns out that now we're actually going to see the the URL where Postgres is running. We call that connection string. Can be any name. Connection string. So here we're going to type the URL at which Postgres is running on your computer. Postgres runs with the Postgres protocol. Postgres : / note that this is not HTTP. Postgres : / localhost. Localhost is just our own computer. Postgres servers, this might be different from some of you. Maybe the ones that are running on Windows and Ubuntu. But by default, Postgres database run on port 5432. So we do localhost 5432. And then we just need the name of our database. In this case, Facebook DB. Let me close this. So we have this. Let me put this at top. PG setup. So import PG promise. This is the URL at which our database is running. So under the hood, when you type a command on PSQL, that command is being sent to this URL. This is the URL where your Postgres database is running. And it's always running. As long as you have this elephant here, it's running over there. So then for instantiating the database, we're going to say const db equal pgp, and you pass in the connection string. So this is how we can sort of connect, PG promise can connect to our database. Cool. So then this is what we're going to be using, the DB object. This DB object is going to be, it's a JavaScript object with some methods that are going to let us talk to Postgres. That will be after a lunch break.